He is a family member. He's been on several times, and we've talked about his beginnings and how he got into, the medical field. And he's a forensic specialist who has seen far too many gunshot victims come across his metal table over the course of the years. And we're going to talk about the impact of that with Dr. Roger Mitchell. Welcome to the Karen Hunter Show.
Hey, Karen. Hey, Sil. Hey, family. How y'all doing?
We're all good. Sil's not here, but you're here.
Oh, Sil's not there today?
Nope.
All right. Well, we'll give her love in her absence.
Absolutely. So, you have, I remember one of the first times we had a conversation with you, you talked about the impact of seeing bodies come across your table with gun violence, as a result of gun violence. Can you, for those who hadn't heard you before, can you explain to us what happens to the body?
Yeah, so for everybody, I'm a medical examiner, so I do autopsies and do death investigations. And part of that is any deaths that are due to non-natural causes I see, and particularly violent deaths, and those are homicides, suicides, accidents. And in any case, that body is going to be either picked up from a scene or from a hospital and brought to the office. And in the case like we're seeing in Las Vegas, you're talking about 59 individuals that either have gunshot wounds, or some of them, from what I understand, may have been trampled. There may be some other injuries that have caused death amongst that group. But all of them would be going to either the medical examiner or the coroner's office. But violence in our communities, there's about 33,000 firearm-related deaths in this country, 33,000 firearm-related deaths. The majority of them are suicides. See, people talk about violence and want to put it in a particular community, but there are particular demographics and people who are killing themselves using firearms that doesn't look like the African American community, even higher than the homicides that are occurring in the African American community. So violence is a problem in this country, no matter what age, race, gender, or creed. And so it requires a particular dialogue that I'm just not seeing happen.
Yeah, no, which is why I'm so glad that you're here. We, one of our other family members, Terrell J. Starr, wrote a piece today about how his inability to get a gun saved his life because he was contemplating suicide. So I know you're spot on with that. So many lives have been saved because of people being depressed and wanting to commit suicide because they didn't have access to a gun. But yeah, we're not having that conversation. And we're talking with Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr., board certified forensic pathologist. He is a medical examiner and a fellow with the American Society of Clinical Pathology. He's also a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners. And he graduated from Howard University and UMDNJ Medical School. And he's performed more than 1,300 autopsies in his life. So when a person is gunned down, what physically do you see? Say they're shot in the chest. What damage does that do to the tissues around it?
Oh, I mean, it's clear that if the medicine of a gunshot wound is the ripping of the flesh of the chest, and then in the chest cavity, and then whatever vital organs may be affected, that cause blood to be the end result of that injury, and then a recovery of that bullet or that projectile is part of the evidence recovery that we would need to do in every case. You brought up a really good point about the access to guns being a risk or a protective factor to violence. One of the biggest research articles, Karen, that occurred in 1996, occurred in the New England Journal of Medicine, actually concluded that access to guns in the home is an independent risk factor for homicides and suicides. And what happened in 1996 was there was this omnibus bill that had the Dickey Amendment in it, that at that point Congressman Dickey was being lobbied by the NRA, and Dickey put an amendment saying there should be no federal funding going to research to make a link between access to guns and violence. And so that functionally...
Why would someone do that? Why would someone not want us to study the impact of gun violence? What's the purpose of that?
That's rhetorical, right? I mean, when there's profits and gains to be lost, it's very similar to the tobacco area or the industry. Nobody wanted to no tobacco producer wants to make a connection between smoking tobacco and cancer and heart disease. And no gun manufacturer would want anyone to make a connection between access to guns and violent deaths. And so that Dickey amendment essentially is a gag order on CDC-funded research in this country that has persisted since 1996.
866-801-8255. That's, it's so obvious that I don't know why more people are not up in arms about, how we're being played out as people, as citizens, that we've literally handed our liberties over to a gun lobby, and they are playing marionette, they're playing puppet master with all of our lives. And there's not like this massive outcry. Instead, they have so brainwashed people that folks are willing to go out there and fight for their right to continue to be brainwashed. It is amazing to me. We're talking with Roger Mitchell, Dr. Roger Mitchell. Is there a difference when an assault rifle bullet or just a 9mm versus maybe a 22, what damage it does to the body? Is there a difference?
Absolutely.
Okay, talk about that.
Absolutely. So, an assault rifle, high velocity powered rifle is going to rip through tissue and cause more destruction than a regular gun and particular ammunitions, and largely because of the speed in which the bullet is moving through the air. The higher velocity, the speed, the higher the kinetic energy. When it goes into tissue, it's going to cause more destructive stopping power in that tissue. I remember when I was a medical student and was rotating through the Baltimore medical examiner's office, and I was there during the last DC sniper shooting of the ride-along bus driver, and he was hit with a high-powered rifle. And the destruction that happened of his liver inside of him, you couldn't see from the outside. There was a small hole on the outside, but on the inside there was massive destruction. And so some of your callers and you have talked about the need for assault rifles or high-velocity rifles in the hands of community, and there isn't really any need for that. I too am had a gun license in New Jersey, and I'm a gun owner. Had been a member of the NRA before I realized what that membership entailed and who they were. And am a student of, and this may go to some of the things that you've been talking about, Robert F. Williams. So Robert F. Williams wrote a book back in the 1960s called Negroes with Guns, and talked about how African Americans should arm themselves. And it was in a time where it was pre-Black Panther, and actually the Black Panthers note him as a big inspiration to his work. So your readers should read Negroes with Guns so they can understand the history of African Americans bearing arms in this country. But there's no doubt that assault rifles or high-velocity rifles cause more damage, tissue damage, than a normal handgun.
So what should we do? What ultimately, I get frustrated, and I tend to not even want to talk about, gun control, because I don't feel like the Americans have an appetite for it. I think we've been brainwashed into this belief that if, we have this conversation, that somehow we're going to be left powerless to some overtaking of our government. And the way the narrative is being spun in certain communities is there's going to be some sort of racial uprising, and white folks won't be prepared. That's the way it's being couched, when most blacks can't even get gun licenses. But, I don't know where to go from here. Like, I'm frustrated. I know logically it makes no sense that we have access to all of the guns that we have. We don't need them. We really don't. And I'm willing to give up every gun imaginable for us to, have this conversation and at least move towards a safer America, the way other countries like Great Britain, Australia, which is, also part of that, have done. And they've seen the numbers of suicides and murder go down dramatically.
Yeah,
Why can't we follow the common sense?
Well, again, we can't grow weary in well-doing, right? So the great thing is that you have this show where you probably have a record audience, right, today, because people want to hear what, the nation, the Karen Nation is thinking about and talking about, and the Party of Lincoln is thinking about and talking about. And the reality of it is that, and I'm a part of the National Medical Association, which is the oldest black physician group in this country. I just co-authored a paper on the epidemic of violence in the African American community, and it'll be coming out in December. It's in publication right now. And the reality of it is that we need to advocate. If we're not advocating for sensible gun reform, which we should, right? We need to close the loopholes. We need to make sure that individuals can buy guns legally and then illegally deposit them in our community, right? Because that's what's happening. There's diversion of guns that are bought legally that are being diverted into communities of color for a profit. And it's largely because there's a lack of tracking of guns and ammunition. And so there needs to be a tracking of guns and ammunition, and that won't abdicate anybody's ability to own a firearm. Just know that if you give that firearm up or sell that firearm, or you sell your ammunition or lose your ammunition, you're going to be accountable to that ammunition and that firearm wherever it ends up. And that's my thought. But the big thing is the research. The fact that there's epidemiologists and social scientists and physicians like myself that can't go to the Centers for Disease Control, which studies injury and disease for this country, and cannot get funding to understand the effects of guns in homes, that they're even banning physicians from having conversations with their patients surrounding guns. That's the type of thing that we need to fight against. That's the type of thing that everybody needs to get on the phone with their congressperson or senator and say, listen, functionally lift the Dickey Amendment. Now, some will say, yeah, Obama lifted it. He said that you need to fund CDC gun research. This was after Sandy Hook. But the reality of it is that Congress never acted, and Congress has not put a line item in the CDC budget to allow for gun research. We need that. And so out of that, you just talked about Nobel Prize, right? You just talked about celebrating scientific rigor, right? And understanding bending light and bending atmosphere, right? But all that is what? For what? I get it. That's great research. But imagine someone doing the research that understands the relationship with human behavior and access to guns, and that breakthrough actually leads to a decrease in the 33,000 deaths that occur annually that are occurring amongst suicides and homicides. So there needs to be advocacy. There needs to be education. And then there needs to be an understanding that we can't legislate to these outliers. What has happened in Las Vegas, and my condolences go out to the families and even the first responders whose lives will never be the same after this. We can't legislate to an active shooter event. Active shooter events are blips on the radar.
Yep.
What we need to be talking about is what's happening in Chicago, what's happening in Detroit, what's happening in Newark, New Jersey, what's happening in Washington, D.C. We need to be talking about social determinants of health and access to firearms and the interruption of violence and violence as a public health issue, so that we can truly save lives, but not only save lives, but give opportunities to our communities that need the opportunities.
So everything else is just noise, and people.
It's all noise.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
It's all noise. Now there is a place to utilize these spaces and places to bring truth to power, but you know that you'll never get a comprehensive movement towards gun violence based upon a single active shooter event.
Right.
Because single active shooter events can't give you the context. They happen sporadically. They're even saying it out. We don't know why he did it.
Right. They're anomalous too. You know,
they're anomalous.
You have Columbine. How often does that happen? You have Timothy McVeigh. How often does that happen?
It happens. Yeah. Once a year you'll get something. Maybe. Once a couple years.
Right.
That's fine.
There's no pattern. Even Dylan Roof, the terrorist that went into that church in Charleston, South Carolina, and gunned down people, those 9 beautiful souls. Even that's anomalous. You know those
absolutely. Now that has its place in institutional racism.
Yes,
there's no doubt.
That's something else.
Right.
But
that's something else.
But to have the kind of conversation we must have as a community, as a country, we need, and the fact that the Dickey Amendment doesn't allow us to have the full data to actually study and examine this we should all be outraged by that, and that should be something that should put us on the streets to march. But again, I don't believe we have the appetite for it, but we're going to keep banging the gong here. And we have, soldiers like you, Roger Mitchell, in the hunt, and we're going to continue to talk about this on Wednesday as well, on Wellness Wednesday, with another doctor that's in the mix. And we just, we got to keep the ball in front of us, so we don't get distracted.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir.
You got it. 100%.
Dr. Roger Mitchell, you can follow him on Twitter. I'm sure we tweeted out his information, right? And we also tweeted out the book, Negroes with Guns, because that was a good one. Now I got more stuff to read. Boy, my reading list. Whew. But I'm here.